Yes, good morning. We continue entering the last phase of the yoga of the soul's release. And what we read last time is the process of a heightening of the consciousness. And as one climbs above, the light comes down and enters into the deeper depths. And this is a process through which one grows into the perfect integer of his soul. It's a very interesting journey. One is reminded of, in fact, it gives a detailed description of the whole process of purification in this yoga, which is not just the moral and ethical purification, but a spiritual and a psychic purification, which means that as one opens to the above and the beyond, the lights and powers and delight and peace comes down and begins to impose itself more and more on the restless nether members and even the body and even below into the subconscious parts. And through this process, the purification takes place, much like the legend of Hercules, where one of the tasks he is given is to clean the Aegean stables. And the Aegean stable, as we know, has so many horses that by the time one goes to the last horse, the first few horses have already started dirtying the place. And so what Hercules does is he opens the dam to the river, and as the river flows down the stables, it keeps cleaning and the place never gets dirty. So this is the process. As the light, as we climb higher, the light can descend deeper into our lower parts. And as these parts are cleansed, we can climb still higher and higher. And in this process, we read last time these beautiful lines on page 4.1. Even where caught as through a cunning veil, the smile of love that sanctions the long game, the calm indulgence and maternal breasts of wisdom suckling the child laughter of chance, silence the nurse of the Almighty's power, the omniscient hush, womb of the immortal word, and of the timeless, the still brooding face, and the creative eye of eternity. The inspiring goddess entered a mortal's breast. We have been reading about the three goddesses, in fact four, the inspiration, revelation and intuition. But there is a fourth one which comes right at the beginning, the power of right discernment, truth speech, truth action, called as Dakshina in the ancient Vedic lore. The power that reveals in a single glance, separates the true from the false. But now, as this goddess of inspiration, the light from above, the truth light, as it enters a mortal's breast, made there her study of divining thought, a new kind of thought begins to appear in us, not the thought that analyzes and knows things, but it is a thought that is touched and uplifted by the planes of knowledge, to the planes of knowledge, by the touch of a higher consciousness, and thereby it becomes automatic and intuitive, as it were, divining the truth of things by a direct sight, made there her study of divining thought and sanctuary of prophetic speech. Our speech begins to assume more and more a prophetic note, and sat upon the tripod seat of mind. This is a very beautiful description. The mind is not discarded. The tripod seat is the rational mind, the vital mind of imagination, and the physical mind bound by the senses. So all these truths, all these levels of mind are made instruments. A greater truth sits above and uses reason, uses imagination, and uses the very data of the senses to a new meaning and a new value and a new revelation of things. All was made wide above, all lit below. In darkness core, she dug out wells of light. So now starts a very interesting movement. Aurobindo brings out again another deep yogic truth, the truth that we find in the Vedas and also in the Hellenic myths, in the Greek myths and the Egyptian myths. In the Vedic lore, it is the legend of, there are two legends. What Aurobindo is going to reveal to us is revealed in the form of two legends. One is the legend of Angiras and the cows, and Aurobindo has devoted quite a number of pages to this legend. The legend roughly is that the cows have been stolen. Cows, as we know, is symbolic of light. Go, the word go actually means light, from which Gopal, Gomati, etc. come. And these cows or the light has been stolen by Pani and Vritra, whose chief is Vala. And they've been stolen and hid in the caves, in the dense forest, and these beings who have hidden them in the caves, they become very active at night. As the legend goes, that during the daytime the gods can keep an order, but during night the gods cannot see them and they become very active. And so Indra, along with Agastya, there are two versions of the story. One is Indra and Angiras. They come together, and Angiras, by the power of the mantra, the word, he breaks open the subconscious layer, the den of these Vritras and Panis, who are the forces of darkness and division. And these stolen cows are released. And in another version of the story, Rishi Agastya, he drinks the ocean, the aprakritim salilam, the inconscient floods, the ignorant floods, and these robbers of the deep who are hidden inside the caves, he breaks them open by the power of the word, and as they come into the open, Indra by his thunderbolt kills them. The legend has been often used, or rather misused, by certain interpreters to create an Aryan-Dravidian divide, that these were the Aryans who basically drove away the Dravidians, and the Dravidians were the Panis and the Vritras. But the story is actually describing an inner process, and the Panis, the Vritras, as the name goes, Panis are those who are traffickers and misers, who steal some wares which are meant for some other place and they sell it at a low price, or they hoard it and never let it see the light of the day. And similarly, Vala, their chief, is one who lives in a little hole. So these are all powers of darkness who wait the moment the light and the power and the consciousness and the delight descends. They hold it, or they divert it to wrong uses, to wrong channels. Especially their hold is on the sensory world, on the nervous sensations, on the physical being, on the lower vital being. They have a very strong hold. And even when the higher mind, the higher parts of the mind and the heart is free from their clutches, in the lower reaches they continue to take a hold, and therefore yoga assumes the nature of a battle. But as this light comes down from higher and higher realms, eventually it wins the battle for us. So we have these lines: on the undiscovered depths imposed a form, lent a vibrant cry to the unuttered vast. As this inspiration begins to descend more and more, the mortal speech assumes not just a voice but gives a form to a truth which does not find a home in the human heart and mind. Lent a vibrant cry to the unuttered vasts, and through great, shoreless, voiceless, starless breaths bore earthward fragments of revealing thought, hewn from the silence of the ineffable. So the thought not only climbs to above, but from the higher worlds a thought comes stealing down into the mortal ken and finds expression in the speech of the mortal. A voice in the heart uttered the unspoken name. A dream of seeking thought wandering through space entered the invisible and forbidden house. The treasure was found of a supernal day. In the deep subconscious glowed her jewel lamp. Lifted, it showed the riches of the cave. So as this light came down, it opened the subconscious doors also. And just as in the beginning of the yoga, there is a gap rent between our mortal state and the above towards the higher planes. So now even these fallen planes, these lower parts which are concealed in our subconscious, and time to time they escape or find expression in our speech and actions. Now these caves were also broken open, and there this light goes and reveals what is hidden there. In fact, Aurobindo speaks of the Greek myth of Helen, and we know the story of Helen and Menelaus. But Helen herself represents the dawn goddess, and her two brothers, Castor and Polydios, just like the Ashwin Kumars of the Vedas. The whole myth is again cast along similar lines of this Vedic lore of Angiras and the cows, where by the miser traffickers of sense, unused, guarded beneath night's dragon paws, in folds of velvet darkness draped they sleep, whose priceless value could have saved the world. So this light and power and delight and peace, as it descends, these traffickers and misers of the sense, they hoard it, they cover it, so that it, after a while, we do not find it anymore, and we have to once again make an effort. But yet it is not lost. It is hidden in the caves of the Panis and the Vritras, because even in the dense darkness there is the light which is hidden, a darkness carrying morning in its breast, looked for the eternal white returning gleam, waiting the advent of a larger ray and rescue of the lost herds of the sun. In fact, there is another myth in the Veda about the eighth son of Aditi. As we know, the seven sons are the seven godheads beyond the mind, but the eighth son has been cast away into matter, and he is Martand, who must come out and battle against the forces of darkness. So he is the lost son, but before the sun is recovered, the herds of the sun, the truth that hides behind falsehood, the light that hides in the breast of darkness, that is recovered. In fact, this famous Upanishadic mantra, Asadoma Sadgamya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya, assumes a new significance in this light. Its common meaning is from darkness to light, from death to immortality, and from falsehood to truth. But it can be read in another way, that take me to the truth that lies concealed in falsehood. Take me to the light that lies concealed in darkness. Take me to the immortality that hides in the cape of death. In a splendid extravagance of the waste of God, dropped carelessly in creation's spendthrift work, left in the chantiers of the bottomless world, and stolen by the robbers of the deep, the golden shekels of the eternal lie. So there is a wealth which lies even in the subconscious parts. There is a sun which hides there. Shekels, as we know, it's actually a Mesopotamian currency, and also an Israeli currency. It's also used as an offering into the temples. In fact, in dream visions, if one sees finding some coins in the dust, it is a symbol of these subconscious parts opening up, and we discover the prosperity or the hidden treasures which lie in the subconscious parts, where they've been stolen by the robbers of the deep, hoarded from touch and view and thought's desire, logged in blind enters of the ignorant flood, lest men should find them and be even as gods. Now here there is a very interesting observation of the mother. She says, with regard to this passage, this is a very vivid description of all the possibilities that have been stolen from men and shut up so that they could not use them. But the same possibilities will be revealed by the new consciousness and put at the disposal of men if they wish to become supermen. and go beyond their poor consciousness towards a fuller and a more divine realization. This is just the work that is being done now for all those who aspire and are ready. So this work has already been done by Ashupati, by Aurobindo, and as we become ready, this light which is concealed in our own depths will be revealed more and more to us. And then what happens is described: a vision lightened on the viewless heights, a wisdom illumined from the voiceless depths, a deeper interpretation, great in truth, a grand reversal of the night and day. The mother describes this reversal of consciousness. Right now we understand the high on the basis of the lowly. We understand the depths on the basis of the surface. We understand the vastness on the basis of our smallness. But when this reversal comes, the small is seen in the light of the vast, the low in the light of the high, and the surface in the light of the depths. So we have a new interpretation, a new understanding, a new revelation of the value of the worlds. Therefore, a grand reversal of the night and day. All the world's values changed, heightening life's aim. A wiser word, a larger thought came in than what the slow labor of human mind can bring. A secret sense awoke that could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. So we had seen earlier the awakening of the subtle senses and Ashupati's entry into the inner worlds, worlds of beauty, of splendor, of light, of sound, worlds built by consciousness and force. And now a subtlest of the subtle sense awakens, and it is with this sense that one perceives the presence of the divine within, around, everywhere. The universe was not now this senseless world. So this is the gist of the knowledge which will be described in great detail in the next canto. Now with this change, the universe was not now this senseless world, borne round inert on an immense machine. It cast away its grandiose, lifeless front, a mechanism no more or work of chance, but a living movement of the body of God. So this universe which appears to our outer eyes merely a mechanism, a machine, the machinistic view of life as we know, in which chance and necessity play with each other to create a world which is senseless, aimless, driven blindly like a clock, but a clock without a watchmaker, or as someone has put it, the blind watchmaker. This is the view of our blindness. But when this new light comes, this new knowledge reveals to us that this universe is nothing but a living movement of the body of God, a spirit hid in forces and in forms, was the spectator of the mobile scene. The beautiful line we have in the Ishopanishad, this is the revelation that Ashupati is having now. Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat. All that is mobile, in motion, within a universe of motion. All that is individual and separately moving, within a universe that is moving. Within all this, in the smallest and the vastest, there is hid none else but the Lord. The beauty and the ceaseless miracle, let in a glow of the unmanifest, the formless everlasting moved in it, seeking its own perfect form in souls and things. So the whole sense of the universe changes. Our life and the many forms are nothing but meant for the habitation of the eternal, the Lord, who moves in it, seeking from it a form, a deathless form and a divine name. Life kept no more, a dull and meaningless shape. So this is the malady called boredom, And the reason is that the more we live on the surfaces of life, it refuses to sate us, because the meaning and the sense lies deep, and we begin to suffer from the melody which the mother has said, boredom, because the surface cannot sate, and after a while either we become more and more restless, or life begins to appear dull and meaningless. But with this discovery of the divine within, life is no more dull and meaningless. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth. Otherwise, we remark, like the great poet, that what is this life but a tale told by an idiot, with much sound and fury, but without any meaning in it. This is our ordinary view, but when this inner sight awakens, when we discover the inner presence, then we begin to see in the struggle and upheaval of the world, in the crashing of the floods, in the storm, in the lava spitting from the volcanoes, in the drifting of the stars, in the supernova and the asteroids, we discover the labor of a Godhead's birth. A secret knowledge masked as ignorance. So what we call as ignorance is only the frontage. Behind there is knowledge, a wisdom, which is trying to express itself in terms of ignorance. Fate covered with unseen necessity. Fate, as we know, is the complex play of forces, and that remains hidden. What appears in the front is a necessity or chance which drives this wheel, the game of chance of an omnipotent will. But as we discover the deeper and deeper consciousness within, this wisdom that works in nature's breast, we see that there is nothing really known as chance, but there is a omnipotent will, an omniscient wisdom which uses the most paradoxical seeming steps for hastening its advent, a glory and a rapture and a charm. The all blissful sat unknown within the heart. Earth's pains were the ransom of its present delight. So the whole pain that we bear in life, the struggle, the suffering, is not just for survival, as science tells us, not even just for evolution that would equip us for a greater and greater survival, but it is the evolution of consciousness. It is the birth of a greater and higher and more perfect form, which can embody a greater delight and a more perfect consciousness. And this birth is through a process of pain, like all births indeed, because it must pass through a narrow gorge towards a greater vastness. A glad communion tinged the passing hours. The days were travelers on a destined road, the nights companions of his musing spirit. A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. So we have this another legend from the 10 incarnation of Vishnus. There is an incarnation which stands between an animal humanity and a divine humanity, and that is the Vamana, the divine dwarf. He is a little dwarf, but he comes to conquer the heaven and the midworlds and the earth. And this divine dwarf is the human figure that the psychic being, the little flame in us, has assumed. And though seemingly small, imperfect in form and expression, it towers to unconquered worlds. Earth grew too narrow for his victory. Once only registering the heavy tread of a blind power on human littleness, life now became a sure approach to God. So when we are in ignorance, then life appears not only dull but a drudgery. We feel in the hands of fate a cruel power or a blind power which we have to bear so long as we are alive. But when knowledge awakens, then we look at it in another way, and life now became a sure approach to God. We see that through all the blindness and error and pain, life moves towards its master, towards its soul beloved. Existence, a divine experiment, and cosmos, the soul's opportunity. So the world is not a place to be shunned or dreaded or a place where we must be afraid of. It is the opportunity of the soul to build immortally with mortal things, to manifest the divine in his integrality. The world was a conception and a birth of spirit in matter into living forms. In fact, that is the original meaning of the word birth. In the Upanishadic lore, birth is a self-limitation assumed by the spirit. So what we call as birth is not just the birth of a body, but it is the birth of spirit in matter and into living forms. And nature bore the immortal inner womb that she might climb through him to eternal life. So the soul has entered into this dark blindness so that this may be transmuted into light. And nature, which now is full of ignorant movement but which is pregnant with a deep wisdom inside, may awaken to its own heights and climb to its own highest reaches. His being lay down in bright immobile peace and bathed in wells of pure spiritual light. It wandered in wide fields of wisdom self, lit by the rays of an everlasting sun. Even his body's subtle self within could raise the earthly parts towards higher things and feel on it the breath of heavenlier air. So as we can see, the mother, when she speaks of this passage, says something to this effect, that eventually this process begins to impress itself even upon the physical self, and the transformation comes step by step. But then she says the inner change must precede the outer. It is only when our soul is free from ignorance, it's only when our mind is open to revelation, intuition, inspiration, it's only when our inner senses are freed from the clutch of matter and the subconscious has been cleansed of all the dross and the mud and the robbers and the panis and the vidtas defeated and driven away. It is only when we can sense the divine presence and greatness everywhere, and wisdom and knowledge has awakened within us, that slowly the physical transformation begins, because this is the most difficult part. Now Ashwapati is experiencing that even his body's subtle self within, not yet the gross matter but the subtle physical, could raise the earthly parts towards higher things and feel on it the breath of heavenly air. Already it journeyed towards divinity, abjured upon winged winds of rapid joy, upheld to a light it could not always hold. This of course is about the physical change, that even the body, gross matter, begins to assume a luminosity, it begins to assume a lightness, and a joy begins to thrill the very, not just the senses, but the very cells and tissues and nerves. Though the body is unable to hold it for a long time, it left mind's distance from the truth supreme and lost life's incapacity for bliss. All now suppressed in us began to emerge. So the mind and life undergo a change. Life becomes once more a happy march towards the divine, and the mind once more blossoms under a light directly from the truth supreme. And now Aurobindo summarizes. In fact, as we read through this passage, this last part where he has summarized the first part of the Yoga of Ashwapati, we can actually see the autobiographical note of Aurobindo's own life, what he must be experiencing in his inner life when he came to Pondicherry, or even before that, because this part of the yoga he had already completed. In fact, Canto 3, Canto 4, Canto 5, if you really look at his life, he had already finished this yoga even before he came to Pondicherry. So we have this, and this reference will also come in Savitri itself, when in book 1, Canto 5, when he speaks of the yoga of the spirit's freedom and greatness. Then he begins to look up to superhuman heights to bring down a greater world. So here we have his inner life, something about his inner life, what it would have been. Thus came his soul's release from ignorance, his mind and body's first spiritual change. This is the psychicization and the spiritualization. A wide God knowledge poured down from above. A new world knowledge broadened from within. So the essential knowledge begins to turn into a detailed knowledge of the world forces and their working. His daily thoughts looked up to the true and one. His commonest doings well from an inner light, awakened to the lines that nature hides, attuned to her movements that exceed our ken. He grew one with a covert universe. So he begins to, all that is hidden inside is revealed to him. It's very interesting that just around the time that Aurobindo came to Pondicherry, in February 1910, he made a prophecy which was later published, that since 1907 we are living in time of great changes. Great revolutions would move the world and new things that are to come, and amid all these upheavals, India will become free. So he was already aware of the deeper forces that were at work for the new light, for the new consciousness waiting to descend, attuned to her movements that exceed our ken. He grew one with a covert universe. His grasp surprised her mightiest energy springs. He spoke with the unknown guardians of the worlds. Forms he descried, our mortal eyes see not. Often one wonders what was Aurobindo gazing at, hours and hours, sitting with his eyes open as if looking far away. So we have a brief description here. He spoke with the unknown guardians of the worlds. Forms he descried, our mortal eyes see not. His wide eyes bodied viewless entities. He saw the cosmic forces at their work. We know how Mother has described that Shiva would come, Krishna would come and want to participate in the work of transformation. And there is a very interesting anecdote that when Mother was sitting in the playground and one by one the children were coming to her. So one of them gave her an offering of the Dhatura flower, which she has named Tapasya. And she said, oh, a few moments before Shiva was here, and he would have been very happy to receive it because he is very fond of this flower. So this is the kind of life, the inner life of one who is not only freed from ignorance, but who is open to the higher worlds, to the beyond, and in whom this process has taken place as described in the yoga of Ashupati's release from ignorance, and felt the occult impulse behind man's will. We know how when the world was even at times completely awed and misguided by Hitler's propaganda, how Aurobindo could see behind him the sight, the voice of the Asura who had come to threaten the world with menacing energies, to push the work back, the evolutionary impulse back, through tens of thousands of years, and felt the occult impulse behind man's will. Time's secrets were to him an oft-read book. The records of the future and the past outlined their excerpts on the etheric page. Even when Aurobindo was in Chandanagar and even before, he used to see these lipis, what he is called as lipi, which was a sort of writing on the etheric page, on the subtle essence of which matter is made, is ether. And on that etheric page, on the subtle essence of matter, he would see written some of these the Ved Richas and some of these truths from the past. They used to come to him, and that is how Aurobindo came in contact with some of these powers and energies and forms which came to be known in his, associated in his mind, as he says, with the three great Vedic goddesses or the four great goddesses. So these are his own experiences which he is describing. The records of the future and the past outline their excerpts on the etheric page, one and harmonious by the Maker's skill, the human in him paced with the divine. So just as the divine consciousness that has built this universe holds all the three movements of time in a single glance, in a single vision, so also in Ashupati this consciousness grew, from which nothing was hidden. The past and the future, they came into the present and revealed their sense and meaning to him. His acts betrayed not the interior flame, well, like our human acts do, that what the soul wants of us or wills within us is deformed by the time it reaches the outer chambers and the outer instrument, but not in Ashupati, who is freed from this ignorance and has already undergone a first spiritual change. His acts betrayed not the interior flame. This forged the greatness of his front to earth. A genius heightened in his body's cells. His body's cells became more and more capable of a greater and greater light, of a greater action and power of consciousness. As Aurobindo says that lines after lines, at times even 200 lines, 300 lines of poetry would flow down like a mighty river, whereas otherwise one would labor for hours just to write a line or two. So this is the phenomena of the genius in the true sense, when we are open to a higher power and consciousness that uses us as its instruments. Of course, a genius is not conscious of this greater power, and very often he thinks it is his own, though all true geniuses realize that it's not they, but something greater than them which takes hold of the instrument. So here Ashupati is conscious of this process. In fact, a genius is nature's attempt to overshoot her own limits. But here Ashupati realizes, experiences that his very body cells are becoming more and more capable of holding a greater and greater light and consciousness, and to express it. No wonder we have these volumes and volumes of Aurobindo's luminous lines of light. A genius heightened in his body's cells that knew the meaning of his fate-hezed works, akin to the march of unaccomplished powers, beyond life's arc, in spirit's immensities, apart he lived in his mind's solitude. So this is the life of the Great One, a demigod shaping the lives of men. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. We have this letter of Aurobindo to Mrinalini Devi, where he says, I know I have the power to lift this fallen race, and the whole world is knocking at my door. So we see that how this ambition of the soul, of course here ambition is in the sense that normally whatever is the greatest capacity or possibility of the soul, it shoots beyond it, because the possibility of transformation had not yet manifested on earth. So we have this beautiful line, powerful line, One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. The universal strengths were linked with his, filling earth's smallness with their boundless breaths. He drew the energies that transmute an age, immeasurable by the common look. He made great dreams a mold for coming things, and cast his deeds like bronze to front the years. His walk through time outstripped the human stride. Lonely his days, and splendid like the suns. And tempted. This line reminds me of a line from the Kathopanishad. Lonely his days and splendid like the suns. While describing the release of this soul and how the soul views this universe, there is a very powerful line. Suryo yatha sarvalokasya chakshu nalipyate chakshushe bahya dosha eko vashi sarvabhutantaratma nalipyate lokadukhen bahya. As the sun shines in the firmament above and watches upon all the works below, all the various movements and activities, and yet remains untouched and alone, so too the Jivatman, the soul within us, is the witness to the deeds of nature, the good and the bad, and yet it remains untouched and alone. His walk through time outstripped the human stride. Lonely his days and splendid like the suns. So here ends this canto, end of canto 3, and maybe next time we will start the next canto, the secret knowledge, where all these findings, we have seen that a new world knowledge, a wider world knowledge and a new God knowledge begins to pour from above, and new possibilities are revealed to Ashupati. The universe loses its facade, and behind this immense facade one sees a presence and a greatness everywhere. Luminous hints are given to us in this canto, but what is this secret knowledge that is revealed to Ashupati, we will see in great detail in the next canto. Okay, Mahipal. Yes, so if there are any questions related to this. Yeah. Yes, please go ahead. Right. Yes, it's a very, very beautiful question, and there are two ways of recovering the Vedas. Recovery of the Vedas is in a way necessary because it's a link, it's a bridge that links the past to the future. So, the recovery ideally should be within, because, it's as we begin to live these truths, then we realize what depth and profundity there lies in the Vedas. And Aurobindo himself followed that process. In fact, he experienced the Vedas and then he read them, and then he could see what deep, profound wisdom lies there. So this is the best way. And the other way, which also one can follow, because not everyone is as fortunate to straight away have an entry into the inner depths and the wideness above, and not only that, for that knowledge to reveal the hidden meaning of things. So Aurobindo's work, The Secret of the Vedas, is actually a very monumental work which reveals the inner meaning of the Vedas. He meant to do a lot more. In fact, he meant to take up the entire Rig Veda, but he never really took it up. But T.V. Kapali Shastri and others have done the work. But having said that, Aurobindo having taken out the truths of the Vedas, he wanted to take it further to its own logical culmination, because Vedas are an early attempt, an early effort of seers who were basically powers of higher consciousness, who had taken human forms for priming the earth to this greater glory which will come in the future. So all the hints are there, the basic processes are there, but the process is taken to its utmost and widest possibility in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. And therefore Savitri, we can say, is not only a recovery of the Vedas and the Upanishads, but taking the Vedas to its highest and the widest possible culmination. So if one really reads Savitri, then everything is there. Of course, in another language, as we are reading, we see that the entire process, the 7 rivers, and it's much more closer to us, because of one, the medium is English, which is more or less a universal language, and the psychological symbolism is very, very clear. Whereas in the Vedas, unless one has a very intuitive sense within, or one is fortunate to have some experience, bedrock of experience, or one has read the the secret of the Vedas, then of course the key is given to us and it becomes very simple. But without that, it's very difficult to crack some of the symbols. But whereas when we read Savitri, the psychological and the spiritual meaning becomes very, very clear. Like when we read about the robbers of the deep, etc., we'll never mistake them to be simply a conflict between two races or tribes, as has been spoken to us. But we will see very clearly that this is an inner process of change. So Savitri in that sense does contain everything. It is a bridge between the past and the present, but more importantly, it is a bridge between the past to the future, running to present. So it is, he recovers the lost truth of the past, and he also brings close to us the truths which are yet going to be revealed in the future. But he brings it in a language that at least is readable and to an extent comprehensible by the human mind. So that is the beauty of Savitri. It's a bridge between the past and the future, but given in terms of the human consciousness as of present. You're welcome. And maybe a mail just needs to be sent out to everybody, and if everybody is fine with it, we can meet next week and then meet on the 19th. Yeah. Okay. So have a beautiful day. Yeah, have a beautiful day.